MCP. I think the GitHub Copilot, one of the amazing things I do is like when I'm sitting and coding, I'll just turn on the voice part of it if I'm at home. I'll speak for like 2 minutes straight and it will do the whole thing for me because I then switch to O1 Pro. It's so good. It is so good. So that's like my latest experience with like using these assistants to do work. And I wouldn't say it's vibe. It's kind of vibe coding, but it's not because I check my code more than what other people do. But it's been super cool. What are some of the tools you've been using for agents?
I have been using a range of different tools.
Yeah.
One of them has been ChatGPT, Claude, but also trying to dabble between Cursor, Windsurf, and Replit, and also these one-shot tools like Lovable, V0, Bolt New. I've just been trying many different things to figure out what works for me the best. I have a set of tools now that I've gotten really comfortable with, like Lovable for prototyping. Then I switched to Windsurf for more of the back-end stuff, and then to Replit for deployment because I feel like that's really easy for me.
So you've got your end-to-end pipeline kind of stuff.
And I use Cloudflare for domain and hosting and stuff. So I've done that a couple times now, so that's made it very easy.
So you're using these as a developer tools more than like I use ChatGPT because I'm using ChatGPT not just as a developer, but like every day, like help me write this email or do something.
Yeah, I think both. So day-to-day use, I have ChatGPT actually on my iPhone bottom taskbar. I think I removed like Slack or something and I replaced it with ChatGPT.
Wow.
That's become my like go-to. Like, because sometimes I'm driving and I'm like, I need this. I have this idea and I want to jot it down. So I just fire it up right from that taskbar quickly, and then I just speak to it, and then I go home later and then I iterate on that idea.
I think like I'm starting to see a lot more use come out of these tools, but there's still a lot stuff missing, right? So for example, if I was to use ChatGPT to do tasks, like it doesn't have access to my tasks software, whatever I use. Let's say I use Google Keep or whatever. It just doesn't have access to that. And I'm hoping like this whole wave of MCP and all of that is coming in. But there's also a lot of stuff to be desired from like the user experience, and I know you've been thinking about this a lot, wherein the experience is very, this is the only way you can interact with us right now, right? The interfaces are not adapting to what my current use cases or what my context is and so on. And you've been thinking about that. So tell me more about like what do you feel these interfaces are lacking?
Yeah, like I think today the analogy I would give to how the AI tools are today is like having an intelligent coworker, but they'll only reply to you on text messages. Right? Like I've actually had that kind of coworkers, right? So where I'm so glad that I get to work with them, and I really appreciate having that intelligence, but maybe it's not so adaptive. They're not so adaptive. So amazing would it be if you had that adaptive coworker who understands your method of communication, your way of interacting, and is empathizing with you. And I think that's kind of where we can desire that type of an intelligent system where it's not just intelligent, but it also has these other adaptive capabilities.
In fact, like when I use ChatGPT, I'm almost like a reluctant user of it because a lot of times I'm copy pasting stuff inside and out of the context in order to do things, right? And then I have to always keep on giving it the same prompt again and again, which is like, in what case am I thinking about this blog post? Or, I need this to be in a certain output format and so on. So I think like that context is definitely missing. And somehow what we are used to right now is there's a one-size-fits-all interface and you are stuck with that. But I guess like what you're talking about is like, there's so many ways to think about this other than just chat, single text message based stuff. So what do you think? Why do you think they need to be adapted though?
Yeah, I think given what we know today on these intelligent models and where we're headed, right? We're headed towards smarter models, cheaper models. Intelligence is going to be table stakes.
Right.
What's going to be differentiating, like as many people have already pointed out, is the taste is something different.
Yeah.
But I think another element that we haven't really focused on in these conversations is the relationship aspect of it.
I love that.
And I think the relationship humans have with these intelligence, with this technology, is going to be a crucial differentiating factor when intelligence is so commoditized and becomes table stakes in every application.
Right. And it's almost like with the website, you know, you had the same buttons and text boxes, but it was the user experience that these brought out together that was fascinating. And I think we're going to see more of these user experiences come up, which for the agents. Did you have any other like examples of like when a normal interface doesn't work and why it needs to be adaptive?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you just said about how web interfaces brought about these buttons and UXs is absolutely the development that happened. But I think we're coming to a new phase of development with intelligence.
Right.
I think it's beyond that UX and UI, beyond the buttons. It is more about understanding context, being empathetic. And this is where sort of this mental model framework that I've been thinking about. But before we get into that, I think like to take a step back, I feel like there is been a shift, right? And I think just to get what I've been thinking about is like, from what I've learned from the printing press, for example, right? Back in the like 14th century, 15th century, when the printing press got created, but prior to that, people were hand making books, right? And the whole focus was on the manufacturing of these books. It wasn't about the content of the books.
Okay.
Once the printing press was created, the manufacturing became so easy.
Right.
Because they were not handmade anymore. And so then the focus shifted upon the creation of books. What should we make? What should we write about? The content of the books. Then new roles got created. The editor role, the publisher role, all these other roles got created. I think that's kind of where we're headed, I feel like, with technology and applications, because now creation of applications, like creation of books, is going to become so much easier with no code and everything, right? It's about what are we making? It's the content and how we make it. How is that going to relate to the users? That becomes important.
Do you think of this in the context of like business value from the user experience, because then you want to own your user experience, or are you thinking more about this like it's just table stakes, the next table stakes thing after AI?
I think there is going to be there's going to be a spectrum, right? It's going to be like today, when you talked about websites and buttons, we have websites that completely suck and they look really ugly and bad, but people still use them. They're like billion-dollar companies, right? But they're also experiences where they are beautiful, they are intuitive, right? They're very different and people absolutely love them. I think the question becomes, who are you building for? What are their needs? If it's part of their day-to-day life, how can it really stand out, right? And become a part of their lives and they really embrace this long-term.
I love that. So let's dig into this mental model for the adaptive interface that you're thinking of. You've called it AEIOU, and like I was telling you on the way over here, which was the moment I read it, and I read like 20 seconds in, I'm like, I need to talk to you about this, because it is just so clear and such a useful framework for thinking about how the agent adapts. But I'd like to learn more about it from you. So what does AEIOU stand for?
So AEIOU is a mnemonic framework just to help the folks, keep this at the top of the mind. It's A is for awareness, E is for empathy, I is for intelligence, O is for orchestration, and U is for understanding. Just to go into a little bit for each of these, awareness is basically about if the AI is able to recognize context, that is the awareness aspect, and the empathy is it able to respond to emotions, and the intelligence aspect is about can it predict your needs, and the orchestration is about can it maintain cohesion across different devices and different environments. And finally, the understanding is it able to build relationship with you over time? So that's sort of where it comes from. And the reason I kind of thought about this model and this framework, and I felt like I needed it for myself, is because as a developer, as an engineer, I feel like we have many frameworks, many models, many things for engineering, like cap theorem and all kinds of things like that, right? But for design and for building this, I felt like I didn't come across anything which would put a framework together for me to think as I build a new application each time. And I felt like after attending some of the Stanford courses and reading some of the content online, everyone were talking about it, that how important this type of adaptive interfaces or design is going to be important. I've seen some tweets also by Microsoft AI CEO and as well as Stripe CEOs talk about it. But I feel like this was lacking, and without this, the progress we make will probably still be focused on the old format and not really the new way of building things.
And especially like in the valley where everything is just so technology focused, we're like actively talking about, oh, the next MCP or this new quirk with the deep learning framework or something like that. We're talking about the technical stuff, not as much as how do we take a step back and think about these agents that we are building, which is why this is also very, very fascinating. But let's like jump right into this. Like, tell me about awareness. And again, for the context of the listeners, we're not talking about awareness that the agent without adaptive interface has. We're talking about the awareness that the agent has in order to build an adaptive interface.
That's right. Yeah. So let's jump right into awareness. Basically, the agent has, or the AI has, context and limitations. I think a lot of times we think about context, we think about how much does the agent really aware of the user's context, right? But I think given what we've seen already with this AI, and on our drive here, you were also mentioning this, where the trust factor is not quite there because it's sort of made up, right? And I think that is important. People have seen the downsides of AI hallucinating and coming up with the wrong things, right? And it's doubly more important when you think of this in terms of healthcare or finances. So when AI knows its limitations, its own limitations and capabilities, I think that awareness should translate to users by stepping forward, knowing when to step forward and when to step back.
I love that.
So, like, imagine an interface where it says that I'm building something around the medication space, right? And I am trying to build it in a way, or design it in a way where it is very clear about, hey, in this particular scenario, I think you should consult your healthcare professional. It's not suggesting to you what to do here, but it's saying that this is beyond my capabilities. It's time for you to reach out to someone professional.
And I think that in itself can change what is being displayed to the user from a UI perspective. But I think when I was reading your article, also what stood out to me is like the awareness about the context that the situation that the user is in. For example, let's say I was speaking this earlier, which is I have like 2-minute conversations with GitHub Copilot so that it will write the code for me. I will do that at home. I will not do that in a public space because then there's no IP there. I just don't want people to think I'm a weirdo for talking to an agent for 2 minutes before coding, right? And so, and the interface just doesn't change according to where I'm at, right? So that context was one thing that I read in the article, which was super fascinating. You also mentioned like uniquely engaging with the system. What does that mean?
I think in terms of empathy, the next part of the AEIOU framework is it needs to adapt its tone and approach based on emotional state. And why I think this is more and more important is we have an opportunity now for the AI to really understand the user's current state. You can have a best friend or a spouse, but even they can have a bad day in their life, right? But AI is at that place where if you can train it and build the behavior in such a way that it can always be a supportive, emotional partner to you. And let's go back to this example about the medication space that I'm building in, right? I'm trying to build the adherence aspect. So adherence is where they take their medication or they miss their medication. Now, a lot of apps I've seen have come towards medication adherence as a forceful way, like policing it.
Yeah.
Like, hey, here the notification. Have you taken your medication?
Yeah.
Right. I feel like that's a very forceful approach.
Okay.
But if you build empathy
Okay.
into the process, then
Love
it would be like, okay, you've been pretty perfect at taking your medication this week, but you
Gotcha.
missed that one dose.
Yeah.
So how about changing the language around it to being like, it seems like you're busy. Is there another way I can help you to take your medication? How do we integrate this into your daily flow?
Yeah.
Rather than policing and being like, hey, you missed, you 1 out of 9 opportunities that you had to take your medication.
Because with that example, I think if with notifications, there's almost like a notification fatigue. Like if I see 16 notifications, I'm just going to mark them all as red, right?
Exactly.
But at the same time, if you know, like, well, users can drop off at certain point, then changing the language, changing the way in which you're gently reminding the user that, hey, it might not be you, it's probably the situation, or it's probably the UI that's doing it, how I can help. I think that makes super sense. Yeah. After empathy, the next thing you mentioned was intelligence. So that's AEI. And intelligence also could mean like this whole deep learning, blah, 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 intelligence. But I think what we're talking about here is just taking observer perspective and say, does the agent do the work that you want it to do, right? The agent should seem perceptive,
That's
for
right.
example.
That's right. Yeah.
So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think intelligence here, what I'm trying to try to get across is the system doesn't just respond, but it actually anticipates based on your patterns and context.
Yeah.
So let's go back to this medication management example. What I'm trying to build here is, let's say a user is very consistent with their medication, but every Thursday afternoon when the user visits their child or visits their friend, they tend to miss the medication, right?
Okay.
So it knows a pattern. It recognizes the pattern,
Gotcha.
and then it anticipates, and maybe 30 minutes before sends the notification.
Okay.
And going back to your previous point about the notification noise and fatigue, this is where notification cannot then be perceived and be actually useful. When intelligence is combined with that and says, like, okay, 30 minutes before.
And I can see easily, like, let's say Wednesdays, I have a longer commute than usual because I'm going into office. It's that one day when I have to show up into work. The interface, the intelligence detects that, from the awareness detects that you are going to miss your 6 p.m. medication because you are in transit. But either it can tell you to prepare for it beforehand, or it can gently remind you as soon as the context switches to home, like, great, let's not forget that medication.
Yeah, that's it. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. This kind of sort of reminds me to some of the work like I've done a long time ago back at Toyota. So there's this Japanese concept called kigakiku. Kigakiku means somebody who's like observing you and listening to you, and even before you ask for it, is able to do stuff for you. For example, I don't know if you've ever visited Japan, but like, let's say you go to a Japanese restaurant, they make you take your shoes off, you go in, and then by the time you come back, somebody's rotated those shoes for you so that you can step out into your shoes, right? It's a simple thing, but they're like, they know that, hey, this is what you do. You observing on a train that there's an elderly person coming in, and then you're making sure you're not only giving up your seat there, but you're also making sure that they need the seat to be lowered down. So that's just observing, and it's a different kind of intelligence.
Thoughtfulness, right?
Yes, exactly. And yes, that's the word that is closest in definition to this. But like, that's not necessarily how many billion parameters you've got.
Exactly.
That's more the what the humans would like to think of intelligence.
Yes, it's beyond that, right? It's the icing on the cake, not the cake, but the icing on the cake. And I think it's so amazing that you remember this, right? And there's a reason you remember this, because that moment made you feel special, or it made you it felt like and the empathy and everything came together, and it connected for you, and you still remember that, right? And I think we have an opportunity to create that level of experience with all the AI products going forward.
This makes me think, like, maybe that aha moment which used to happen with a mobile app or whatever, this is now what the agents interfaces need to think about. Like, what's the aha moment with the customers? Like, you know what, I trust you now. Let's continue. No matter what you say, or I'll trust you more, and whatever recommendations you give me, because now I have more trust.
Yeah.
I will start using it.
Absolutely. I think, see, even now, like today, even as us, like being pretty tech savvy and how many different models we use, we know the responses, everything we get are pretty one tone. Right, they're not there yet.
Right.
So much to be done here. I feel like where imagine if it was more curated, more understanding, there's more context. Even the smartest models today. I just tried this the other day because I saw it on X. Someone post, ask ChatGPT to create a visual image of you based on everything it knows about you. And it created this very professional, suited guy. And it's not who I am. If you look at me,
I know, you're a very well dressed guy, casual,
right?
Casual San Francisco vibes.
I was surprised that such an intelligent model is still perceiving me visually in that lens.
For sure. I totally see this. I think we've been talking about awareness from agent being aware about you, but there's a slight angle to how the agent can help is only if the agent also has awareness about what it can do. Now, from a technical implementation standpoint, this might be like, oh, what other tools do I have access to? But you're talking about like orchestration as like not just knowing what or knowing how to do it and doing those actions, but also like almost a cohesion in this context of like generating that experience.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. That's right. So orchestration for me means the system feels like one coherent, intelligent platform and not just some disconnected tool that happens to just share some data, right? I think having, my last couple of 7 years, I was been working at Apple and I've seen how Apple has developed the iOS and the Mac OS and how it makes things move seamlessly. I love, my favorite feature is like the copy paste, right? I just copied on my iPhone and I pasted in my Mac OS. That just is like a magical experience. And I think we need more of such magical experiences where the context is there and it is shareable in different environments.
I love that example because when you talked about that, I'm not thinking about, oh, how is it implemented, right? I'm not talking about what tools does it have access to. What I'm talking about is that orchestration, the flow just brings out that seamless experience to create these joyful moments that, oh, this agent can actually work for me. Right?
It just works. I think that's what we all want. It just works. There's no, there's no complexity or no knowledge the user needs to learn. They're actually, we're meeting the user where they are. Everybody knows copy paste, right? And they just didn't invent anything, in that sense, very different. You can copy paste on your phone, and
it's
then
not
just
a new
copy paste.
protocol.
Exactly. You're not learning how to copy paste differently on your Mac OS. You're just copy pasting on the phone and just copy pasting on your desktop, right? So that level of so going back to like this medication adherence example, I think where here it's important is if someone sets a reminder on their phone, the same reminder shows up on any of the other devices. Maybe they're talking to their Alexa or their Siri. It works even in that context, right? It's coherent in that sense where the system is intelligent.
And I also like feel sometimes I've made the mistake of over-engineering for technology. So I'm like, oh, these are the technologies that are available to me. Let's just implement it. For example, we were doing some agent inside the car research a long time ago. And machine learning algorithms learn by examples, and they try to, you are either having a classification or a regression kind of thing. They're trying to set the temperature for the customer when they get back into their car, right? So the idea was, well, let's learn what are the temperature preferences. So on a hot day, what temperature do they want? On a suddenly San Francisco weather gets colder, what temperature do they want, right? And so we built this like really clever algorithm that samples like X amount of data points and learns preferences. When we actually put users inside that, the feedback was not that, oh, it's learning, because it was keeping adjusting like 68 degrees, 68.4 degrees, 71.2 degrees, whatever, right? The feedback was, I don't think the system is intelligent. They're like, what are you talking about? Let's implement this magical machine learning algorithm. And they're like, no, it should just remember. Why is it learning? And for them, this whole thing about what intelligence was that it should just effing remember what I just did the last time, right? So people's perception of what that helps is, and that brings me to that last point of AIOU, which is like understanding. So you talk about it from a long-term learning perspective. Tell me more.
Yeah, so we've been talking about how agents and the relationship, right,
Yeah.
with agents and AI. One of the key aspects of relationship is you can have these short-term transactional relationships, or you
Yeah.
can have long-term meaningful relationships.
Right.
I think if you're trying to build something for long-term meaningful, this is where the understanding is important, where it learns the patterns over time and understands you better, right? In fact, we all have such busy lives.
Yeah.
We ourselves have sometimes not the best memory of what have we been doing. Like if you ask me what I did last weekend, I may not remember that, right? So it's so helpful when we have these agents now to be able to be our companion, where it actually captures, right, long-term view and helps us and guides us and enables us to be better, you know, in our lives. Going back to this medication idea, is the way I've been thinking about this is basically over time, let's say the model is able to understand that the user is very good at taking their morning medications but is struggling with the evening or night medications. That is a powerful analysis to put in front of the user to help them, you know, change their behavior. And so that level of tracking is very helpful. Another friend I was talking to, I'm trying to now focus more on pain management, and he's recovering from a leg injury. And he was saying that this app would help him understand his pain levels and how they go fluctuate when he's taking certain doses, higher dose, low pain, medium dose, still low pain, but you know, or you know, and then low dose, high pain, right? Like, can he stay on a medium dose? Does he have to, you know, up his higher dose? Because ultimately he's trying to get off of these pain medications. So he's struggling to do that today. Right? He's doing it on paper and a pen and paper. And imagine a model that has this long-term understanding.
Yeah, because in that example, it's not just about the dosage. It's also about the timing, perhaps, right? Which is, are you taking it when you are in critical pain? Then you'll take a high dose. But even before you get to that pain, maybe there's some the agent can understand and say, well, you know, this is actually the right time to intervene and give you that recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've talked about obviously like how you're applying this to your stuff that you're working on right now. Where do you see this whole idea of this relationship that we talked about in the car come together?
Yeah, I think of it this way, right? Like, you know, if I spoke to my wife the same way as I speak in a conference, you know, at giving a talk, my relationship wouldn't go the same way.
For sure.
So I think we have to have, you know, a framework, a way of designing AI systems in a way where they're more humane for human relationships. I'm sure there will still be AI systems and agents that are not so relationship focused because they will be transactional ones, very short-lived, right? But when you're trying to build something that is long-term, daily use, and things like that, I think it's important to think about that aspect of this. Does it really fit naturally into the user's life and how it adapts, and you know, and is more intuitive?
Yeah. I love that. And then lastly, maybe any parting thoughts? What's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, like as I'm building these things, I'm thinking of not just this framework, but also, you know, what you were talking about previously, that we're building these intelligent models. And we're doing such amazing work in terms of evaluating these models and figuring out how to fine-tune them and stuff. I fear we're going to fall into the pit of intelligence, right? And that falling into the pit of intelligence, what I mean by that is not that it's not essential. You know, that work needs to keep happening. But will it actually be useful to users? And that, I love that example you gave where ultimately they did not find it intelligent, right? The users. And that is where the bubble could be, you know, that way we talk about the bubble being burst. That is the bubble that could be burst if we're not thinking through the lens of how are we building relationships with these AI models, and you know, how it ends up intertwining into your daily life.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, if I could leave your listeners with one key insight, it is that AI isn't replacing human creativity. Obviously, it's transforming how we express it. I think the folks who focus not just on the technical understanding, but also on how we embed this into their lives with taste, and and all this empathy and insights, I think will go further.
Yeah, personally, I just want the agents to do the work so that I'm let be. For example, right now we have microphones in our hands. We are sitting at this coffee shop, and I just want hey, dude, this agent just listen to what we are saying, and make a blog out of it, talk about it, and you and I can continue having this nice conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, and also recognize that our coffees are running out, so we can order the next round of coffee, and also brings that. And then
I mean, this is a great place, though. I see there's blossoms out. So this is a nice place in San Carlos. So this is fantastic.